Captain Marcus Blackwood stood at attention in the grand marble hallway of Rosemere Palace, his ceremonial rifle gleaming under the crystal chandeliers. After 15 years of loyal service to the royal family of Valdoria, he had seen many palace dramas unfold, but nothing had prepared him for what he would witness today. Princess Elena, the 18-year-old daughter of King Alexander, rushed down the corridor with tears streaming down her face. Her usually perfect golden hair was disheveled, and her emerald gown was torn at the sleeve. Marcus had watched Elena grow from a carefree child into a poised young woman, and seeing her in such distress made his protective instincts surge. The source of her anguish was clear to anyone who had been paying attention to the palace gossip over the past few months. Queen Isabella, who had married King Alexander 3 years ago after the death of Elena's beloved mother, had brought her own son into the royal family. Prince Damien, now 22, was technically Elena's stepbrother, but he had never treated her with the respect due to a princess. Marcus remembered the day Queen Isabella arrived at the palace. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed genuinely caring toward Elena. The kingdom had hoped she would bring healing to their grieving king and princess. However, her son Damien was another matter entirely. From the moment he stepped foot in Rosemere Palace, he had made it clear that he viewed himself as the rightful heir to the throne. Despite Elena being the true blood princess, the trouble had started small at first. Damien would interrupt Elena during royal meetings, claiming her ideas were childish. He would arrive late to important ceremonies, forcing Elena to cover for him. He spread rumors among the palace staff that Elena was unstable and unfit to rule. The king, blinded by his love for Isabella, either failed to see these incidents or chose to ignore them. Marcus had been assigned as Elena's personal guard 6 months ago when threatening letters began arriving at the palace. The letters claimed that Elena was not the rightful princess and that the people demanded Damien as their future king. While the royal investigators claimed these letters came from outside troublemakers, Marcus suspected otherwise. The writing style and inside knowledge of palace affairs suggested someone much closer to home. Today's incident had begun during the monthly council meeting in the throne room. Elena had been presenting her proposal for a new education program for the kingdom's children when Damien stood up and publicly humiliated her. He had produced what appeared to be a forged document claiming that Elena's mother, the late Queen Catherine, had been unfaithful to the king. The document suggested that Elena was not Alexander's true daughter. Marcus had been standing guard outside the throne room when he heard Elena's cry of anguish. Through the partially open doors, he saw her collapse to her knees as the council members gasped in shock. King Alexander sat frozen on his throne, his face pale with disbelief. Queen Isabella placed a comforting hand on her husband's shoulder while Damien smiled coldly at the chaos he had created. The forged document was clearly fabricated, but the damage was done. Elena's legitimacy as the heir to the throne was now publicly questioned. The council members began whispering among themselves, some supporting Elena while others seemed swayed by Damien's calculated performance. As Elena fled the throne room in tears, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of remaining at his post as protocol demanded, he followed the princess. His duty was to protect her, and that protection extended beyond physical threats to emotional ones as well. Marcus found Elena in the palace gardens, sitting beside the marble fountain that her mother had commissioned years before. The princess was sobbing uncontrollably, her whole body shaking with grief and rage. When she saw Marcus approaching, she tried to compose herself, but the effort only made her cry harder. "Your Highness," Marcus said gently, removing his ceremonial helmet and setting it aside. "I know. This is presumptuous of me. But I want you to know, that document was clearly forged." Elena looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "How can you be so certain, Captain Blackwood?" Marcus knelt beside the fountain, abandoning all royal protocol. "Because I was there the night you were born, Princess. I was a young soldier then, but I was on duty outside the royal chambers. I heard your first cry, and I saw the pure joy on your father's face when the doctor announced you were a healthy princess. I saw how your mother held you, how the king wept with happiness. No forged document can change what I witnessed with my own eyes." For the first time that day, Elena's tears slowed. but the council members seemed to believe it. Some of them were nodding when Damien spoke. "The council can be swayed by fear and ambition," Marcus replied. "But truth has a way of revealing itself. We just need to find proof of what Damien has been doing." Elena wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. "You believe he's been orchestrating all of this?" Marcus nodded grimly. "The threatening letters, the rumors among the staff, and now this forged document. It's all too convenient. Damien wants the throne, and he's willing to destroy you to get it." As they spoke, neither Elena nor Marcus noticed the figure watching them from behind the garden's rose bushes. A palace servant named Thomas, who had been secretly working for Damien, had followed them and was now listening to every word of their conversation. The afternoon sun was beginning to set when Marcus helped Elena back to her feet. "We need to be careful, Your Highness. If Damien is truly behind this conspiracy, then he won't stop until he has completely discredited you." Elena straightened her shoulders, and Marcus saw a flash of her mother's strength in her eyes. "Then we must find the evidence before he can do more damage. I won't let him destroy my mother's memory or steal my father's throne." As they walked back toward the palace, Marcus felt a deep sense of foreboding. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family. But now that family was divided against itself. The coming days would test not only his loyalty but his very understanding of what honor meant. That evening, as Marcus stood guard outside Elena's chambers, he reflected on the dangerous path they were about to take. Investigating a member of the royal family could be considered treason if they were wrong. But if they were right, and Damien was indeed plotting against Elena, then the very future of the kingdom hung in the balance. The palace felt different that night, filled with shadows and whispered conversations. Servants hurried through the corridors with nervous glances, and even the other guards seemed on edge. The forged document had sent shockwaves through the entire royal household, and everyone was wondering what would happen next. In her chambers, Elena sat at her writing desk, composing a letter to her trusted childhood friend, Lady Margaret, who now lived in the neighboring kingdom of Astoria. If Marcus was right about Damien's conspiracy, she would need allies outside the palace walls. The letter detailed everything that had happened, and asked Margaret to investigate any connections between Damien and potential conspirators in other kingdoms. Meanwhile, in his own chambers, Damien was meeting secretly with 3 corrupt council members who had agreed to support his claim to the throne in exchange for political favors. The forged document had been just the beginning of his plan. Tomorrow, he would present additional evidence that would completely destroy Elena's reputation and clear his path to the crown. As midnight approached, Marcus made his rounds through the palace corridors. But his mind was focused on the investigation he and Elena would begin in earnest tomorrow. They would need to search Damien's chambers, examine his correspondence, and find the real source of the threatening letters. It was dangerous work that could cost them everything. But Marcus knew there was no other choice. The kingdom of Valdoria had enjoyed decades of peace and prosperity under King Alexander's rule, but that peace was now shattered. The palace that had once been filled with laughter and hope was becoming a battlefield where family members plotted against each other in the shadows. Marcus touched the hilt of his ceremonial sword, feeling the weight of the oath he had sworn so many years ago. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new dangers. But he was determined to stand by Elena's side no matter what the cost. The young princess was not only the rightful heir to the throne but also the kingdom's best hope for a just and peaceful future. As the clock tower chimed midnight, Marcus took his position outside Elena's door for the long watch ahead. Neither he nor the princess could have imagined that their quest for truth would soon lead them into the most dangerous conspiracy in Valdoria's history, one that would threaten not only their lives but the very survival of the kingdom itself. The next morning brought an unsettling quiet to Rosemere Palace. Marcus had noticed how several servants avoided making eye contact with Princess Elena during breakfast, and even some of the guards seemed hesitant to offer their usual respectful nods. Damien's forged document was already poisoning minds throughout the palace. Elena had requested a private meeting with her father, King Alexander. But Queen Isabella had interceded, claiming the king was too distraught to see anyone. This only confirmed Marcus's suspicions that Isabella was actively supporting her son's conspiracy. The queen's sweet demeanor from her early days at the palace had gradually revealed itself to be a carefully constructed mask. During the midday meal, Elena and Marcus put their investigation plan into action. While Elena distracted Damien and Isabella in the dining hall with questions about upcoming royal engagements, Marcus slipped into Damien's chambers. The prince's rooms were located in the east wing, far from the main royal quarters, which had always struck Marcus as odd for someone who claimed to belong to the family. The chamber was lavishly decorated with expensive tapestries and golden ornaments, but Marcus was searching for something far more valuable than treasure. He systematically examined Damien's writing desk, looking for any correspondence or documents that might reveal the truth about the conspiracy. In a locked drawer that Marcus managed to open with a small knife, he discovered a cache of letters that made his blood run cold. The correspondence was between Damien and Lord Aldrich Thornfield, a powerful nobleman from the neighboring kingdom of Blackmore, who had always harbored ambitions of controlling Valdoria's throne. The letters detailed a plan not only to discredit Elena but to eventually assassinate King Alexander and install Damien as a puppet ruler under Thornfield's influence. One letter in particular caught Marcus's attention. It was written in Damien's hand and contained detailed instructions for forging documents about Queen Catherine's alleged infidelity. The letter also mentioned bribing several palace servants to spread rumors and even discussed plans to stage an accident that would eliminate Elena permanently if the character assassination failed. Marcus quickly copied the most incriminating passages onto a piece of parchment he had brought with him. As he was finishing, he heard footsteps in the corridor outside. His heart pounding, he carefully returned the letters to their hiding place and relocked the drawer just as the door began to open. To his relief, it was only Elena returning from her diversionary conversation with Damien and Isabella. Her face was pale with anxiety as she slipped into the room and quietly closed the door behind her. "Did you find anything?" she whispered urgently. Marcus showed her the copied passages, and Elena's face went white as she read them. "Lord Thornfield," she breathed. "I should have known. He's been trying to gain influence over our kingdom for years. My father always kept him at arm's length. But now he's found a way inside through Damien and your stepmother." Marcus finished grimly. "This conspiracy goes far deeper than we imagined, Your Highness. They're not just trying to steal your birthright. They're planning to destroy your entire family." Elena sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the threat. "What are we going to do? Even if we show these letters to my father, Damien could claim they're forgeries, just like the document about my mother." Marcus had been thinking about this problem during his search. "We need more than just the letters. We need to catch them in the act, or find additional proof that even the most skeptical council member couldn't dismiss." As they were discussing their next moves, a soft knock came at the door. Both Elena and Marcus froze, but then they heard a familiar voice. "Your Highness, it's Lady Margaret." Elena rushed to open the door, and her childhood friend entered quickly. Lady Margaret had arrived from Astoria much sooner than expected, and her presence brought both relief and additional urgency to their situation. "I received your letter and came immediately," Margaret said, embracing Elena warmly. "But I'm afraid I bring troubling news from my kingdom as well. Lord Thornfield has been holding secret meetings with several of our nobles, trying to build support for something he calls the Valdorian transition." Marcus and Elena exchanged knowing glances. The conspiracy was even more extensive than they had feared. Margaret continued. "My father's spies also discovered that Thornfield has been funneling gold to various mercenaries and assassins throughout the region. Elena, your life is in immediate danger." As if summoned by their fears, another knock echoed through the chamber. This time, it was Thomas, the servant who had been secretly working for Damien. His face was flushed with excitement as he spoke. "Prince Damien requests your immediate presence in the throne room, Your Highness. He says he has additional evidence about your legitimacy that the court must hear." Elena's hands trembled slightly, but she lifted her chin with royal dignity. "Tell Prince Damien I will be there shortly." After Thomas left, Marcus turned to Elena with a grave expression. "This could be the trap we've been expecting. If we're right about the assassination plot, this gathering could be the perfect opportunity for them to eliminate you." Elena looked at the copied letters in her hand, then at her two most trusted allies. "Then we'll have to be ready for them. Margaret, can you get word to your father's men? We may need allies who can arrive quickly if things go badly." Margaret nodded. I brought a small guard detail with me, and my father's captain is waiting just outside the kingdom's borders with more men. They can be here within hours if needed. Marcus checked his weapons carefully. His ceremonial rifle was loaded and ready, and his sword was sharp, but he knew that in the confined space of the throne room, surrounded by potential conspirators, their chances of survival were slim if violence erupted. The three allies made their way to the throne room, where they found an unusually large gathering assembled. King Alexander sat on his throne, looking haggard and confused. Queen Isabella stood beside him with a sympathetic expression that Marcus now recognized as completely false. Damien stood in the center of the room, holding an ornate wooden box that undoubtedly contained more forged evidence. Several council members were present, along with a number of palace guards that Marcus didn't recognize. His experienced eye immediately identified these men as mercenaries rather than loyal Valdorian soldiers. The trap was set, and they were walking directly into it. As Elena entered the throne room, a murmur rippled through the assembled crowd. Some faces showed sympathy for the princess, while others displayed the cold calculation of those who had already chosen sides in the coming conflict. Damien smiled triumphantly as he opened the wooden box. "My dear sister," he said with false warmth, "I know yesterday's revelation was difficult for you, but I'm afraid I've discovered even more troubling evidence about your parentage." He withdrew what appeared to be Queen Catherine's personal jewelry box, which had supposedly been lost years ago. "This was found hidden in the chambers of Sir Roland Westbrook, your mother's former personal guard. Inside, we discovered love letters that prove beyond any doubt that you are not my stepfather's true daughter." Elena's composure finally cracked as she saw her mother's treasured jewelry box being used as a prop in Damien's cruel deception. "Those are lies," she cried out, her voice echoing through the throne room. "You're destroying everything my mother held dear." Marcus stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. Around the room, he saw the unfamiliar guards tense, their own hands moving toward their swords. The moment of truth was approaching rapidly. King Alexander rose from his throne, his face torn between confusion and growing anger. "Damien, these accusations against my beloved Catherine are serious indeed, but Elena is my daughter, and I will not have her legitimacy questioned without absolute proof." Queen Isabella placed a gentle but firm hand on her husband's arm. "My dear Alexander, I know this is painful, but we must consider what's best for the kingdom. Perhaps it would be wise to have Elena step aside until these matters can be fully investigated." It was then that Marcus made his fateful decision. The conspiracy was about to succeed unless someone took dramatic action. The loyal captain raised his ceremonial rifle, pointing it directly at Damien as the entire throne room erupted in chaos. "Stop," Marcus commanded, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years of loyal service. "I have evidence that Prince Damien is conspiring with Lord Thornfield of Blackmoor to overthrow this throne." The room fell silent, except for the collective gasp of the assembled crowd. Marcus had just committed what could be considered treason by threatening a member of the royal family, but there was no turning back now. The future of the kingdom would be decided in the next few minutes, and he was determined to ensure that justice prevailed. Damien's confident expression faltered for the first time as he stared down the barrel of Marcus's rifle. Around the room, loyal guards and mercenaries began to separate into opposing sides, hands on weapons, and tension crackling through the air like lightning before a storm. Elena stood between Marcus and her stepbrother, finally understanding that the moment of reckoning had arrived. Everything she had ever known about her family, her kingdom, and her own identity hung in the balance as the two sides prepared for a confrontation that would determine Valdoria's fate. The tension in the throne room was so thick it could be cut with a blade. Marcus kept his rifle trained on Damien while his eyes quickly assessed the positions of everyone in the room. The unfamiliar guards had indeed drawn their weapons, confirming his suspicions that they were mercenaries loyal to the conspiracy rather than to Valdoria. "Captain Blackwood," King Alexander said slowly, his voice heavy with confusion and dawning realization. "What evidence do you speak of?" Before Marcus could respond, Elena stepped forward with the copied letters clutched in her hand. Her voice was clear and strong as she addressed the court. "Father, I have proof that Damien has been corresponding with Lord Thornfield of Blackmoor. planning not only to steal my birthright, but to assassinate you and take control of our kingdom. Queen Isabella's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "This is absurd," she declared. "My son would never." "Your son has been planning this conspiracy for months," Elena interrupted, holding up the letters. "These documents detail everything, including bribes to palace servants, plans to forge evidence about my mother's honor, and even discussions of my murder." Damien's face had gone pale, but he quickly recovered his arrogant demeanor. "Those letters are obvious forgeries, just like the accusations against me. Captain Blackwood has clearly been manipulating my dear sister against her own family." Marcus spoke without lowering his weapon. "The letters were found in your own chambers, Prince Damien, in a locked drawer, along with detailed instructions for creating false documents about Queen Catherine." King Alexander descended from his throne, his eyes blazing with a fury that Marcus had rarely seen. "Is this true, Damien? Have you been plotting against my daughter and my crown?" The confrontation was interrupted by a commotion at the throne room doors. Lady Margaret had slipped away during the chaos and returned with Captain Henrik, the commander of the palace guard, along with several loyal soldiers. Behind them came Sir Edmund Ashford, an elderly but respected member of the council who had served Elena's grandfather. "Your Majesty," Sir Edmund said formally, "I must report that we have just arrested Lord Thornfield's agents, attempting to infiltrate the palace through the eastern gates. They were carrying gold and weapons, and under questioning, they have confessed to being part of a plot to eliminate the royal family." The tide was beginning to turn. Several council members who had seemed swayed by Damien's earlier performance now looked uncertain and worried. The presence of foreign agents with weapons made the conspiracy impossible to deny. Queen Isabella made one last desperate attempt to control the situation. "Alexander, my love, surely you don't believe these wild accusations against my son. There must be some misunderstanding." "Enough!" King Alexander's voice thundered through the throne room. "I have been a fool, blinded by my affection for you and my grief over Catherine's death. But I will not allow my kingdom or my daughter to be destroyed by this treachery." Damien, seeing his plans crumbling around him, made a fatal mistake. Instead of surrendering or attempting to flee, he drew his sword and lunged toward Elena with desperate fury. "If I cannot have the throne legitimately, then I'll take it by force." Marcus had been expecting this moment. Without hesitation, he shifted his aim and fired his rifle. The shot echoed through the throne room like thunder, and Damien fell to the marble floor, clutching his wounded shoulder. The would-be usurper was alive, but no longer a threat. The mercenaries disguised as palace guards immediately moved to attack, but Captain Henrik's loyal soldiers were ready for them. A brief but fierce battle erupted in the throne room, with the sounds of clashing steel and shouted commands filling the air. Marcus dropped his empty rifle and drew his sword, positioning himself protectively in front of Elena as the conflict raged around them. The fight was over quickly. The loyal guards outnumbered the mercenaries, and several of the conspirators were captured alive, while others lay dead on the ornate floor. Queen Isabella, seeing her son bleeding and her conspiracy exposed, fell to her knees beside Damien with tears streaming down her face. "Isabella," King Alexander said sadly, "I trusted you with my heart and my kingdom. How could you betray that trust so completely?" Through her tears, the former queen finally revealed the depths of her deception. "Thornfield promised us wealth and power beyond imagination. Damien was supposed to be a puppet ruler, but I truly believed he would be better for Valdoria than—" She looked at Elena with bitter resentment. "Than a naive girl who has never known hardship." Elena approached her stepmother with dignity and tact, despite everything she had endured. "I may be young, Isabella, but I would never sell our people's freedom to a foreign lord. That difference between us has nothing to do with age or experience." Sir Edmund stepped forward with a scroll bearing the royal seal. "Your Majesty, I took the liberty of preparing formal charges against all conspirators. Prince Damien, Queen Isabella, and their accomplices will be tried for treason against the crown and conspiracy with foreign enemies." King Alexander nodded gravely. "See that they receive fair trials, but let the evidence speak clearly. The kingdom must understand what nearly happened here today." As the prisoners were led away and the throne room was cleared of the aftermath of battle, Marcus finally allowed himself to relax slightly. Elena was safe, the conspiracy was exposed, and the kingdom was secure. But he knew the events of this day would change Valdoria forever. Lady Margaret embraced Elena warmly. "You showed tremendous courage today, Elena. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become." King Alexander approached Marcus with a mixture of gratitude and respect. "Captain Blackwood, your loyalty and bravery have saved not only my daughter's life, but the very soul of our kingdom. How can I ever repay such service?" Marcus knelt before his king. "Your Majesty, I simply did my duty as sworn. Protecting the royal family means protecting the rightful heirs and the principles they represent." The king helped Marcus to his feet. "Your duty went far beyond what any man should be expected to do. You risked everything on behalf of truth and justice. From this day forward, you shall be Sir Marcus Blackwood, Knight Commander of the Royal Guard." Elena stepped forward, her eyes bright with tears of relief and gratitude. "Sir Marcus, you saved my life, my honor, and my kingdom. I will never forget your loyalty, and when I become queen, I hope you will continue to serve as my most trusted advisor." Marcus bowed deeply to the princess. "It would be my honor, Your Highness." In the days that followed, the trials of the conspirators became the most talked about events in Valdoria's recent history. The evidence was overwhelming, and Damien, Isabella, and their accomplices were found guilty of treason. Damien was sentenced to life imprisonment in the kingdom's most secure fortress, while Isabella was exiled to a remote convent where she would spend her remaining years in prayer and reflection. Lord Thornfield's agents were returned to Blackmore with a stern warning that any future attempts to interfere with Valdoria's sovereignty would be considered acts of war. The neighboring lord's own kingdom began investigating his treasonous activities, and his power was significantly diminished. King Alexander, shaken by how close he had come to losing everything, began preparing Elena more seriously for her eventual role as queen. The young princess threw herself into her studies of statecraft, diplomacy, and military strategy, determined to be worthy of the crown she would one day inherit. Marcus found his new position as Knight Commander both challenging and rewarding. He implemented new security measures throughout the palace and carefully vetted all staff members to ensure that no future conspiracies could take root so easily. His experience during the crisis had taught him that threats to the royal family could come from within as well as from external enemies. 6 months after the conspiracy was exposed, Elena stood on the palace balcony overlooking the kingdom's capital city. The people below were celebrating the Festival of Unity, an annual tradition that had taken on new meaning after the royal family's brush with disaster. Marcus joined her on the balcony, both of them watching the colorful banners and hearing the joyful music drifting up from the streets below. "The kingdom has healed remarkably well, Your Highness," he observed. Elena smiled, looking more mature and confident than she had before the crisis. "The people of Valdoria are strong and resilient. They deserve leaders who will never take their loyalty for granted." As they watched the celebrations, a messenger arrived with news that would shape the next chapter of their lives. King Alexander had received a proposal of marriage for Elena from Prince Gabriel of the coastal kingdom of Meridian. An alliance that could bring great prosperity and security to both realms. But that would be a story for another day. For now, Elena and Marcus stood together as the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, both of them older and wiser from their shared ordeal. The princess had learned that royal blood meant nothing without honor and courage, while the knight had discovered that true loyalty sometimes required risking everything for what was right. The conspiracy that had nearly destroyed the kingdom was now just a memory, but its lessons would guide Valdoria's future for generations to come. In the end, truth had prevailed over deception. Loyalty had triumphed over treachery, and a young princess had proven herself worthy of the crown that was her birthright. Marcus touched the hilt of his sword, knowing that new challenges would certainly arise in the years ahead, but he also knew that as long as rulers like Elena sat on Valdoria's throne, the kingdom would remain strong, just, and free. The royal guard would continue to stand ready, his rifle and sword prepared to defend not just a person or a crown, but the very principles that made their realm worth protecting. As night fell over the palace, the lights of the celebration continued to twinkle throughout the capital city. a symbol of hope and unity that would endure long after the current generation had passed into history. The story of Princess Elena and Sir Marcus had become legend, inspiring future generations to stand up for truth and justice no matter the cost.